Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the English Daily Book Summary YouTube channel. In order to not stop learning, listen to an English book summary every day for free.
Bruce Nordstrom, leave it better than you found it. 4 generations of retail innovation. Retail is a ruthless business. Cutthroat margins, fickle customers, and relentless competition. One company, Nordstrom, has thrived for over a century by rewriting the rules of engagement. Their secret? Treating customer service as a cultural obsession. This blink reveals how a shoe store founded by a Swedish immigrant became a retail icon. You'll see how Nordstrom's radical decisions defied expectations and delivered results. The story offers more than corporate history. By the end, you'll rethink what service really means and how to embed that irreplaceable human spark into systems, teams, or even your daily choices. No jargon, no corporate fluff, just the raw ingredients of a legacy that outlasted every trend. The Nordstrom Foundation. The Nordstrom story captures the classic American dream in its purest form. It begins in 1887 when a determined 16-year-old named John Nordstrom left his small Swedish village with nothing but $5 and enormous ambition. Like many immigrants of his time, he endured back-breaking work, swinging axes in logging camps, plowing fields under the scorching sun, and descending into dark, dangerous mines. But his fortunes changed when he joined the Alaska Gold Rush, returning to Seattle with a substantial $13,000, equivalent to nearly $500,000 today. With this hard-earned capital, John entered the retail world through a partnership with Carl Wallen, a skilled shoemaker he'd met during his gold prospecting days. Their small store at 4th and Pike in Seattle opened quietly in 1901, generating just $12.50 on its first day. What set them apart wasn't flashy marketing, but consistent quality and fair prices. They cultivated trust with working-class customers who needed durable, comfortable shoes they could rely on. The business truly began its transformation when John's 3 sons, Everett, Elmer, and Lloyd, assumed control in the late 1920s. Taking over during the onset of the Great Depression might have seemed disastrous, but the brothers viewed it as their moment. In 1930, they invested in major renovations, replacing linoleum with carpet and tripling their display space. 7 years later, they made their boldest move yet, relocating to 5th Avenue between Pike and Pine Streets. Though their father worried about the location being too far from Seattle's commercial center, the brothers recognized the area's potential. Their inventory strategy became legendary in retail circles. While competitors carried limited selections, Nordstrom stocked every conceivable size, width, and style. Women who wore size 13 shoes or men needing size 20 knew they'd find options when no other store carried them. This created intensely loyal customers who told everyone they knew about the store that finally accommodated them. The World War II years tested their business model severely. With leather rationed and domestic shoe production redirected to military needs, most retailers struggled to maintain stock. The Nordstrom brothers innovated by prepaying manufacturers to guarantee supply. When customers received their precious ration coupons, they flocked to Nordstrom knowing they'd actually find shoes available. The store became known as the place that always had inventory when others came up empty. By the post-war period, Nordstrom had evolved from a single shoe store into the nation's largest independent shoe retailer. The brothers had not just preserved their father's legacy, but multiplied it many times over. Their willingness to take calculated risks, their obsessive focus on customer needs, and their ability to adapt during challenging times created a retail powerhouse. The stage was now set for the company's next evolution, expanding beyond footwear into the full-line department store business that would make the Nordstrom name famous across America. Bruce's retail education. Having established itself as the Northwest's premier shoe retailer, the company's future now rested with the 3rd generation, particularly Everett's son Bruce. His retail education began not in boardrooms, but on sawdust-covered stockroom floors, preparing him to steer Nordstrom through its next evolution. This hands-on training would prove invaluable as the company faced changing consumer demands and expanding competition. By age 9, Bruce was already learning retail's harsh lessons. When supervisor Fred Krantz made him resweep the entire stockroom, young Bruce discovered Nordstrom's uncompromising standards. These early experiences grounded him in the physical reality of retail work, far removed from executive privileges. As Bruce entered his teens, his responsibilities expanded to the bargain basement shoe department. Managers initially restricted him to selling slippers and tennis shoes, fearing his shy nature might cripple somebody with improper fittings. The painfully awkward teenager flushed crimson during customer interactions, developing empathy for employees who didn't take naturally to sales. Following university and military service, Bruce faced his first real test managing the University District Store. With just 12 employees and $300,000 in annual sales, this compact operation became his proving ground. Handling everything from window displays to payroll gave him intimate knowledge of daily retail challenges that would inform his later decisions. The Portland expansion in 1957 forced Bruce to adapt Nordstrom's formula to new territory. When competitor Meier and Frank launched aggressive price cuts, Bruce responded by matching their discounts and then reducing prices by $1 more. This year-long battle tested Nordstrom's resilience, proving their willingness to compete while maintaining quality standards. Portland also refined Bruce's understanding of customer needs through manager Fred Rady's nightly ritual. The simple question, "What did you miss today?" kept staff attuned to inventory gaps. When a salesman mentioned lacking size 7B Navy pumps, Bruce immediately ordered 20 variations from Seattle, a responsiveness that became a company hallmark. These formative experiences, starting from the lowest positions, managing a small store, expanding to new markets, and learning to listen to salespeople's needs, provided Bruce with the foundation he needed as he prepared to take on greater leadership responsibilities. When he was called back to Seattle in 1963 to become president of the company at just 30 years old, he brought with him not only theoretical knowledge, but practical wisdom gained from years in the trenches of retail. Growing the family business. When the young Bruce returned to Seattle to take the helm of what was by then a successful regional shoe chain, the company stood at a crossroads. Should they continue expanding their proven shoe business or venture into uncharted territory? The decision they made would transform Nordstrom forever. That year, after lengthy family discussions, Nordstrom acquired Best Apparel, a women's clothing retailer with stores in Seattle and Portland. The acquisition represented a watershed moment in the company's history. Moving from shoes to full-fashion retail wasn't just a business expansion. It required a cultural transformation that would test the Nordstrom family's adaptability and vision. The integration wasn't exactly seamless. Best took a dramatically different approach to retail, with the fashion-forward, high-end customers to whom it catered. Bruce recalls visiting the Best store after the acquisition and finding an eerily empty second floor with only velvet curtains and a settee. A stern-looking woman watched the elevator, evaluating each customer before escorting select ones to a back room to view merchandise. This formal, exclusive atmosphere contrasted sharply with Nordstrom's accessible, inventory-rich approach to selling shoes. The fashion establishment initially rejected these newcomers to their territory. Vendors were reluctant to sell to Nordstrom, questioning whether former shoe salesmen could successfully sell designer clothing. The breakthrough came when Estée Lauder agreed to sell its cosmetics line to Nordstrom, a landmark deal that lent credibility and opened doors to other vendors. Navigating this new business required different expertise, and Bruce recognized his limitations. Rather than pretending to understand women's fashion, he hired Bob Bender from JCPenney. Bender understood the Nordstrom work ethic while bringing necessary apparel knowledge. Each year, Bender would take 4 Nordstrom fashion buyers to Europe to train them how to select merchandise. These educational trips, where they drove all night between cities and stayed in cheap hotels, became part of company lore, demonstrating how Nordstrom's hardworking culture could apply to fashion buying. As the business evolved, so did its leadership structure. Bruce, recognizing the value of multiple perspectives, shifted from sole president to sharing leadership with his cousins, John and Jim Nordstrom, and his cousin by marriage, Jack McMillan. This unusual Office of the President arrangement distributed responsibilities based on individual strengths. John oversaw men's apparel and shoes, Jack managed women's ready-to-wear, Jim handled juniors and sportswear, and Bruce managed women's shoes and investor relations. The family faced another pivotal moment in 1971 when they needed liquidity for the retiring second generation. They considered three options. The first was the younger generation buying out their fathers, but that was financially impossible. Alternatively, they could sell to another retailer, or finally, they could go public. After careful consideration, they chose the third option, though it meant opening their once private business to public scrutiny. Bruce, as the company spokesperson to Wall Street, faced initial skepticism from analysts. The company's unusual inverted pyramid organizational chart, placing salespeople at the top as closest to customers, and their emphasis on service over traditional retail metrics seemed unconventional. Yet as results proved their approach successful, analyst attitudes shifted dramatically. The Nordstrom Way. As Nordstrom evolved from a regional retailer into a public company with a growing apparel business, the leadership team recognized that its next frontier lay beyond the Pacific Northwest. This national expansion would test whether their distinctive approach to service could translate across diverse markets and cultures. The critical moment came in 1978 when Nordstrom opened a store at South Coast Plaza in Costa Mesa, California. This constituted a dramatic leap into what Bruce considered an entirely different world. Most retailers would have expanded gradually northward or into San Francisco first, but when developer Henry Segerstrom approached Nordstrom about his Orange County Mall, the leadership team saw a unique opportunity. Opening day revealed both the risk and potential of this strategy. Bruce remembers standing nervously as the doors opened to an almost empty mall. The Nordstrom team even had employees pretend to be shoppers in the corridor while the mayor cut the ribbon to minimal applause. As the day progressed, however, something remarkable happened. The first curious shoppers who visited were so impressed that they called friends, who called more friends. By mid-afternoon, the store was bustling with customers. The success hinged largely on who would manage this cultural transplant. When their first choice couldn't relocate, the leadership team selected Betsy Sanders, a former German teacher with an impressive academic background who had risen rapidly through Nordstrom's ranks. Sanders' appointment was revolutionary for the time, as female executives were rare in retail management. Under her leadership, Nordstrom established a standard that would define the brand nationally. She insisted that no customer should own anything from Nordstrom they weren't completely satisfied with. What made Nordstrom's approach to service so distinctive? It centered on empowering employees to make decisions without bureaucratic approval. This was embodied in their famous one-page employee handbook with a single rule: use good judgment in all situations. While competitors developed thick manuals of policies and procedures, Nordstrom trusted their people to solve problems creatively. Their approach to merchandise returns exemplified this philosophy. While most retailers scrutinized returns with suspicion, Nordstrom became known for accepting virtually anything back. Bruce explained that their liberal return policy actually increased business. When a widower brought in his deceased wife's unworn shoes, still in boxes, they accepted the return without question, recognizing that compassion trumped policy in sensitive situations. By 1980, just 2 years after opening at South Coast Plaza, Nordstrom had become the third largest specialty retailer in America, trailing only Saks Fifth Avenue and Lord & Taylor. National business magazines took notice, with Forbes dubbing them Bloomies in the Boonies. The company that began with a modest sales day in Seattle was now poised for coast-to-coast expansion, bringing its distinctive service philosophy to markets nationwide. Securing a legacy. As Nordstrom expanded beyond the West Coast in the 1980s, they faced their defining challenge: translating their intimate, high-touch service culture to new markets across America. Rather than expanding gradually, they made a dramatic leap to the East Coast in March 1988, opening a 211,000-square-foot showplace at Tyson's Corner in Virginia. Bruce recognized that East Coast shoppers differed from their West Coast customers. He observed that East Coast clients tended to follow established patterns, while Californians constantly sought novelty. Yet they maintained their service approach, focusing on extraordinary moments that set them apart from established local retailers. One such moment perfectly captured their philosophy. When a customer called their Pentagon City store in a panic because he couldn't tie his bow tie before a formal event, a Nordstrom employee invited the customer to drive to the store. When the man arrived, he never even left his car. The employee stepped outside, leaned through the window, and perfectly tied the bow tie. This small act generated enthusiastic local media coverage and exemplified how Nordstrom differentiated itself in new markets. Maintaining its service standards while expanding nationally required consistent leadership practices. Store managers carried the culture from market to market, with Bruce insisting they embody seemingly contradictory qualities. He believed effective managers needed strength to delegate responsibility while remaining humble as newcomers who needed to win over local employees. Each store opening became a carefully orchestrated community event, often beginning with charity fundraisers that introduced Nordstrom to local customers before the first item was ever sold. This period of national growth coincided with Bruce slowly handing over leadership responsibilities to the next generation. After decades of shared leadership with his cousins, Bruce watched his three sons, Blake, Pete, and Eric, develop complementary skills within the business. Each had started as a stock boy and worked through various positions, gaining comprehensive knowledge of operations. Blake demonstrated exceptional energy and operational excellence, according to his father. Pete developed skill in merchandising, while Eric excelled in store operations. Their complementary abilities allowed them to work together effectively, just as Bruce had collaborated with his cousins decades earlier. The transition across generations wasn't always smooth. In the late 1990s, the company appointed non-family member John Whitaker as CEO, yet his approach diverged from Nordstrom's traditional culture. After his departure in 2000, Blake became president, with Bruce returning as chairman to guide the transition. This experience reinforced their belief that leadership must maintain the company's service heritage rather than chase short-term trends. Through this period of geographic expansion and leadership transition, Bruce found his greatest satisfaction watching the Nordstrom culture take root in new communities. He took pride in how the company evolved from a small organization where he knew every employee to a national retailer with 50,000 employees that maintained even higher service standards than in its early days. In this Blink to Leave It Better Than You Found It by Bruce Nordstrom, you've learned that Nordstrom rewrote the rules of retail by putting people, not profits, first. What began as a struggling shoe store became an empire because it refused to act like a typical corporation. The Nordstrom family bet on radical trust, stocking every size, taking any return, and paying salespeople like partners. They expanded fearlessly, turned skeptics into believers, and proved that generosity drives loyalty. Most importantly, they built a culture where employees would rather disappoint a manager than a customer. The lesson? Short-term shortcuts lose to long-term relationships. Nordstrom proved that when you treat people exceptionally well, exceptional results follow. Okay, that's it for this Blink. We hope you enjoyed it. If you can, please take the time to leave us a rating. We always appreciate your feedback. See you in the next Blink.